Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber with Everyone Loves Guitars. Today, Everyone Loves Guitar. I always mess up the name of my own podcast. Today, I've got a really interesting guest, really cool guy too, Stephen McSwain. Stephen started building guitars in 1991, check this out, while working at his day job selling steel in North Carolina. This is a job his dad and his grandfather before him had also done. In 1996, a Japanese company asked him to build them 10 guitars, and the gross proceeds of this transaction were more than a year's worth of his current salary at the time. So Stephen, understanding how to add up things, said, "I'm ready." And on April 29th, 1996, he left the steel mill to start McSwain Guitars. Today, he builds custom guitars full-time for some of the most well-known guitarists out there from his small but comfy warehouse in Portland, Oregon. People like Slash, Steve Vai, Joe Perry, Vernon Reid, Jerry Cantrell, Duff McKagan, Tommy Lee, Scotty Ian, Tak Matsumoto, Jared Leto, and loads of others all own McSwain Guitars. Stephen, thank you so much for your time, man.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So I wanted to ask you something that I didn't think of before this, but usually guys that go into building guitars are in wood. They're
no common sense whatsoever.
You know what? I've heard the individual who referred me to you said that same comment. He's a guitar maker, so now I'm noticing the pattern. Yeah. But no, most of the guys that are building guitars got there through wood. But you were, in a steel mill. How did that even? I never thought of that until like 10 minutes before. Wow, that is interesting. How did that happen?
It's interesting. It's like, honestly, it kind of started through just my absolute love of all things rock and roll, I had always been creative as a kid. And, when I had done little carvings and things like that with Dremel tools and X-Acto knives and stuff when, my mom and dad were super supportive of, my artistic interest. And so I had little carving tools and things and paintbrushes and stuff, but I just never had the patience to really finish anything that I started. So I would start something and, when you carve something, man, it's in depth. And I could envision what I wanted to do in my head, but I just couldn't get my hands to do it. And, being a kid of, 10, 11, 12, I didn't have the patience to see it through. So, once I got into, the corporate world, I had, had some experience with carving wood, but, the properties of metal always intrigued me as well. I was selling steel and I was seeing how steel was made and the electrical properties of different types of metal. And it was just fascinating to me. And, as a player, I had always played guitar since I was a kid, and all through college had a band at Furman University, and so I said, what about incorporating both together? Now, it didn't start out with just metal. It started out primarily as as just trying to build a guitar and carve this wood. So it did, as with other guitar builders, it did start with, okay, well, I guess, they use maple and alder and mahogany, so let's start with that, So that's kind of where I started, and then it evolved into the whole metal side of things.
It's interesting that you started doing that at you said 11 or 12. It would be tough because building a guitar is extremely intricate, and I think you probably need more focus ability. That's if that makes sense, question. Than an 11 or 12-year-old. 11 or 12, you can handle a model car that you glue together or something. That's about. Well,
it's funny. Pace. That's actually what I started doing, and I see it. My 12-year-old son Jude is really into building models now, so he's sort of following the same trajectory, and hopefully he'll be and kind of working with me, and he loves to.
Hey, are you there?
In the shop and building it.
I lost you. Can you hear me now? No, I lost you for a second. I can hear you just fine now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're actually building his first guitar from scratch in the shop right now at 12 years old. So he's kind of getting a heads up and a jump on that side of things. I did start building models, and it was one of those things where you do. You're exactly right. You go through and you see how things are made and how they function and go together. And then, I just was always the kid that was super interested in how things worked. And I wanted to make sure that I could, fix stuff. So I would take things apart from, a kitchen carving knife, one of those electric Hamilton Beach knives,
The Thanksgiving that gets pulled out once a year.
Yes, exactly. And so, it's in a drawer. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. So I tear it apart and rebuild it. And then I have a handful of parts left over, and the thing runs at about, 1,000 cycles per second. Once I'm done with it, it's like a nuclear strength carving knife. So, but that was always my thing. I was a tinkerer. I would always tear things apart, and that started with I started doing that with guitars. Like my poor buddies that were my friends, I'd borrow their guitars and all of a sudden yank them apart and then put them back together. Unfortunately, I never destroyed anybody's personal guitar or anything, but that's kind of how I figured out how to do it. Was, this is before YouTube or internet or anything like that. I'm dating myself here, but you either bought a book or you got a book or you took something apart and literally physically saw how it operated and worked.
Yeah, remember in the old days, it was like I walked 10 miles to school. Now it's like I did this shit without the internet. It was really hard.
I use that same cliche phrase, and I'm like, I am becoming my dad. It's like that with my boys who are 11 and 12. I'm like, oh God, we're both ways, snow and
Before the internet, but like your kids' age, they probably can't. Wow, before the internet, they can't imagine life without the internet.
Oh, there's no question. It's like, what would we do now? It's the same thing. It's just,
right.
But it's a wealth of information out there. If you are diligent and can seek things out, you can learn how to do anything that way.
Absolutely, man. I agree with you. So I want to hear the whole rags to rich story. So if I didn't ask you this question, I would miss it out. How the hell did that Japanese company that asked you to build them 10 guitars even find you? And after you got the phone call and you put that phone down, how good did you feel?
Well, it's funny because it's still rags to rags. I'm still searching for the richest part of it.
That's another thing. The person that referred me to you said the same thing.
It's one of those things where I go back to my immediate statement out of the gates on the interview. You have no common sense if you go into this industry.
Well, that's a lot of.
And it's funny. I don't.
No, go ahead.
You have to just beat the pavement. And it's literally a labor of love, and it's not a get rich business. It's like I absolutely love what I do. So and trust me, it's like I'm not doing this for free by all means. It's like I've supported a family and my life and how I live for years doing this. But it's one of those things where you're not going to get rich doing this. You just absolutely love to do it. But my quality of life is, you can't buy that. You absolutely, I get up every day and I love what I do. I get to go to work every day, and having that is just invaluable. So, that's the richest part of it right there. So if you're, but that, which leads me back to your question. What happened was I used to go to the NAMM show. I think I first started going in maybe like 94, 93, 94, something like that. I got to go out, and there was a drum company called Trick Percussion out of Chicago, or right outside of Chicago. And they were super cool, and I got hooked up with them through a buddy of mine named Stan Schiller, who was a guitar tech, and he was teching for Aerosmith and a bunch of other different bands. He teched for Steve Vai. And, that was when I would weasel my way backstage at every single show that would come through Charlotte, North Carolina, to try to get somebody to listen to me. I had all the production numbers, yet again, before cell phones. I had all the production numbers for landlines, so I would call them up when a show was coming through town. They're like, yeah, come on down, because these guys are bored on the road. There's nothing to do. So it's like, the techs get to look at some cool guitars. They dig it. They will, would give me passes and tickets, and then I would come back and meet the band. So Stan was this guy who was super cool and was really just I had no clue how the guitar business worked, like building a company. I had just no clue. I was a political science major in college. I sold steel. I was right out of college. I sold medical supplies. So it was just so foreign to me. So he hooked me up with this drum company that made aluminum drum shells, like I said, called Trick Percussion. And they were looking to develop an aluminum guitar. So we paired up, and I did a prototype. We had it machined out of a big chunk of billet aluminum, which weighed like 30 pounds. It was out of control. It looked super cool, but it was just not functional, and so unfortunately I had a bolt-on neck, and so that really fell flat, pun intended, and nothing came out of that. So, but they were cool enough to let me come to the NAMM show with them. So they had this huge booth that was about it was like maybe 40 by 40, and then 2 tiers. It had a bottom level and a top level. So I literally had a bunch of postcards made up by the company Modern Postcard, and it had 4 pictures of the guitars that I had done at this point, which were all hand carved, the Steve Vai, the Alice in Chains, and stuff like that. And I set up 3 guitars, I think, on the outside of their booth. There was like a little 1-foot perimeter of carpet on the wall, and I literally set up 3 guitars with my little box of cards. I mean, it was so shoddy looking and just so half-assed. And I look back at it, I'm like, it's a miracle that I even got an order out of this show, because you look at it and you're like, what is this guy doing? So these guys came by, this Japanese company called Hotline Music Corporation, and I believe they're a distribution company in Japan, and they distribute to several different stores. I'm still actually really good friends with them. And so they come by and they're looking, they're like, wow, what is this? And I explained, I said, yeah, I've done my first guitar, went to Steve Vai, and I did a couple for Alice in Chains. And they said, oh, well, very cool. Well, we would like to order 5 of each if we could. And I thought they were out of their minds. I thought they didn't know that there was something else going on. I don't know.
You're like, excuse me, could you say that in English?
Yeah, exactly. And so I said, well, can you come back tomorrow and I'll have some stuff. So my brain's spinning. I'm like, what do I say? What do I had no game plan whatsoever. And I've always been really fortunate to be able to think pretty quick on my feet. So I get everything put together. I call my dad. I'm like, hey, listen, I've got these guys. I don't really know what to do as far as, what price to put on these things. And so, he kind of walked me through this, and he said, look, what's your time worth? And we kind of had the discussion real quick, and I put a price tag on it, and it was more than my year's salary for those 10 guitars. And I said, look, if I'm going to do this, I want to be able to walk away from my job if necessary and pursue this. And this will give me a cushion to do it. So I put a price tag on it. They came back the next day, and they said, okay, we'll get started. We'll wire transfer you, the money when you're done. So I looked at this, and I was just like, wow. This is a crossroads, I'm at. How do I navigate this? So that was the first step. It was NAMM in this little junky card box that I had set up on the outside of a drum company's booth that got this whole thing started.
What a great story. I mean, I always, I have this saying, you can't connect the dots ahead of time, Oh,
way.
And a million things sometimes have to happen, and then you got to add in serendipity to make stuff, like to stir it all together. And what a good story that is.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those things, you never know what opportunity is going to come up or how it's going to come up, and that's why you always have to have your rabbit ears on, your radar tuned, because I have had so many instances that you would never even you would never connect the dots. Exactly like you said, you cannot plan it.
Well, you got to get out there too. That nothing happens unless you're out there doing shit.
No question. Absolutely, absolutely.
That's okay. So, so was it an issue for you when they said we'll give you a check when you're done, like as opposed to okay, well we'll give you half up front or something like that?
And that was a tough one because. Yeah. Of course, you're not going to say, well, I need this to get started, because that's not necessarily how business is done a lot. Now, granted, if there's a custom guitar or something, I always get 50% down, to a lot of people. But with that, I said, well, okay, I'm going to do the responsible thing. I'm going to continue working at my steel job. I'm going to start working on these after I get home from work and all weekends and stuff, and start cranking these things out. So, it was a great idea to start. And I said, well, I don't know if this is going to work. Been bitten by that bug, and you see your exit strategy. It was really tough to kind of keep focus at the steel company. And I'll never forget my sales manager. She's like, well, listen, I was literally a grunt. I mean, I would get all the random calls from the guy building a hunting deer stand and say, hey, Steve, I need some 2x2 quarter angle. I'm building myself a deer stand to go hunting. And you're like, oh my, just shoot me, And so so my sales manager, she said, look, I need you to get your sales up, or you're in jeopardy here. You might, be on double secret probation. So I said, listen, I'm sitting here staring at an order, doing something that I absolutely love to do that is more than what I make here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in my 2-week notice and figure it out as I go. So and then all of a sudden, when you call, and they're like, oh no, we don't want you to quit. And I'm like, no, my mind's made up. I have to do this. If I don't put all my efforts into this, I'm going to half-ass it, and it's going to drag out. And so I literally pulled the plug. But that being said, my safety net at the time, I was always playing music at that point. And one of my best friends, a guy named Shelly Sutton, I had an acoustic duo with. And he said, look, we can book as many gigs as you want and go out and play all over the Southeast and play restaurants and bars and little patios and stuff like that. And you can survive. And so that's exactly what we did. We started booking gigs and making, good money playing cover tunes, acoustic duo, harmonizing, and having a blast while building guitars. It was like I had won the lottery completely. So that was sort of my safety net income while I was building these guitars. And, over the next few months, I kept building and building and building. And then all of a sudden they were done. I shipped them, and I got a wire transfer for a big chunk of money. And it was just the most incredible feeling in the world. It's like, okay, this is a real deal, viable business now.
So what happened? Were you married at the time or single?
No, I had a girlfriend, but nothing too serious. And so I was sort of, that 20-something-year-old kid who was playing music and building guitars, and no kids, no wife, no real anchor anywhere.
So it came at the right time. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so you make the delivery, you ship them over there, you get a nice big check. What then? Like now, now it's almost like worse. Like, fuck, what's next?
Where do I go from here?
Yeah, right. I need another Japanese guy. I need another, I need Hotline Music Corporation's competition or something like that.
Here's one of my unfortunate / fortunate curse / blessings of my life is like, I don't have that worry gene, and I don't have that oh shit, flip switch.
Right.
So I don't know. I just never really thought about it. I'm like, I'm free. I am going to build. I'm going to go to every show I can possibly get, which is what I did. So, I had the Hotline thing. There was nothing else really coming in from any other stores. So I literally went to every concert that came through Charlotte and would weasel my way backstage, like I was saying, and hit every touring artist that came through. I hit Living Color. Vernon Reid bought one. I hit Blues Traveler. They bought a couple. So between the music and these, onesie twosie customs, I was actually able to make a decent living and survive.
So let me ask you this. You were brand new in running a business, and you're also in your 20s. When
Right.
you went backstage and you'd meet a guy that you had some, maybe not overt, but some fanboy love for it. No, because it's like,
it's true.
Was it intimidating to you to then say, I want you to buy, you had to sell the guitar. You weren't there to just give it to them. And,
Right.
and I'm sure a lot of these guys are used to just getting stuff given to them. How did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a difficult spot for a young guy to be in. How did you like, how did you work through that? And did you like have a routine? Did you, you didn't really have or did you have a sales pitch, or, what was your way of doing it and feeling that, a lot of times when you're younger, I know myself, I always had issues with feeling undeserving. Right. I'm not trying to say everybody feels undeserving.
No, absolutely.
But when you're standing there and you're 25 or 27 years old and you're just going out on your own and you're with basically one of your heroes, your guitar heroes, and you got all that shit going through your head, and add to that, you need to freaking eat. That's not it's a difficult spot to be in. How did you push through that? And like, what did you do to
that was, well, and that's, if I could give anybody like a kid doing anything. And I tell my boys this all the time, is like, your time is valuable. I never had that. I mean, of course, you're meeting Aerosmith and they're ogling and totally digging your guitars, but I never offered anything for free. The first guitar I ever did was just the guitar body that went to Steve Vai. That one I did send him, and that one was free. And I said, here, I want to send you this, see what you think. So in hindsight, and I wish I could say that I planned it this way, having Steve Vai as my first guy who had a guitar was incredible street cred and legitimacy, and so I didn't know that at the time, that would pan out like that, but that was worth its weight in gold, because then, like when Alice in Chains came through town on the Dirt tour,
that was their first album, right? That was their first album.
Second.
Okay,
There was Facelift was the first one, and then Dirt had just come out, and they were doing a club tour with Screaming Trees and Grunge Rock.
That was a great album. That was a great tour.
Oh, it was incredible. And that was one of I have some very funny stories from that little encounter. And so, but Jerry asked me, he goes, who have you built guitars for? And I said, Steve Vai. And they're like, oh, what? Oh, he has your first guitar? I'm like, yeah. And like, and I didn't tell them I'd given it to them. And they're like, oh, well, then it just legitimizes it. So they take you seriously. And I never gave anything away after that, and I never had to, because nobody ever, I mean, you'll have your guys that ask for stuff for free, but it's never really the top tier guys. It's always the B, C list, guys that are a little farther down the food chain that are looking for something. And I get it, these guys are they realize what their profile can do for somebody's guitar business. But on the flip side, can you take that to DWP and say, hey, look, this guy plays my guitar, and that'll pay your power bill or your water bill? It doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
What is it? What do they call it? I saw something on, or I heard an interview, or I saw something, not promotional, exposure dollars. Yeah, yes. You can't buy groceries with exposure dollars.
I saw one that I think Mark Agnesi from Norm's Rare Guitars had posted, and it said, still waiting on that. It was like a bunch of skeletons sitting around at a table. It said, still waiting on that exposure. Yeah. So from that guitar I gave you.
Yep.
So, and that was it. And I think I realized that because I know how much time that I would put into these guitars. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to give this dude this, and it's like, if they did, it's kind of a dick move to ask, So, and I realized that early on, so I didn't give anything away, and it's like, if they wanted it, they bought it. But also, if you think about it, and a friend had told me a long time ago, he goes, if you give somebody something, and like a celebrity, they're not going to value that. They're not going to say, where's my, $5,000 guitar,
right,
if it's not sitting there. But if you gave it to them, they're like, oh, yeah, some kid gave me that. Right. Whatever. It's like, no skin off my back.
Sure.
But if they paid $5,000 or $6,000 for it, they'd be like, where, they're going to take care of it. They're going to value it. And it's a kind of psychological thing that if they pay that kind of money for it, then they're going to value it that much more.
Absolutely. And that works like that for absolutely everything, whether you're selling them consulting services, guitars,
sure,
anything. That it's like that. And the more they're going to spend, the greater perceived value, the more sweat they have in it, and the more they're going to cherish it, Absolutely. Which is why I never gave my kids cars. They always had to buy their own. I contributed, but they had to, because I know you're going to crash it, but let it crash it with your money, so you give it a second thought before you do whatever you're doing.
Exactly.
Really
exactly.
good. I give you credit in that, because I would imagine that would have been an intimidating, or could have been a really intimidating thing to work through. So, that's awesome, man, that you were able to do that.
It got, and thank you for saying that. It got to the point, and this is funny because my wife, she always said, she's like, these guys will ask you for stuff. She goes, tell them this. How would Slash feel if he found out that you gave this dude a guitar and he paid full freight for two?
Right.
So that's my fail safe. It's like,
absolutely, man.
Those guys out there, it's like what kind of asshole would I look like if, all of a sudden I give somebody something and here's Slash paying, several $1,000s for his guitar, which absolutely. Is just, and that's it. That sums it up right there.
I'd be doing my clients a disservice. I couldn't live with that. That's it. End of conversation.
Yep, exactly.
And like you said, it's never the guy. It's the guys that really mean something to you. Never going to. I have found I've been real fortunate in business that I've had some dealings with really successful people, and I've always found that the top tier guys will respect you and your time and your value much more because they've been there and they feel the same way about themselves. Whereas like that.
Sure.
The lower tier is like either they haven't worked as hard or haven't done it as long, or there's a reason there's tiers is I guess what it is.
Absolutely.
So I want to move on, but man, you caught my ear when you said you could tell me some stories from that tour. I don't want to forget that one. So go ahead, tell us a story.
Well, it was funny because I was just when the whole grunge thing happened, it was just so powerful, and I gravitated towards Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and those guys, and they were just so like no bullshit. It was no fluff. It was raw and emotion and dangerous, and it just resonated with me. So of course, they're coming through town. I didn't have tickets. I was building guitars on my own at that point. It was a sold out club show. They had actually oversold it, so people who actually had tickets weren't even getting in. Which was a big mess for the club owner. And this was in Charlotte. So, I'm cruising through and I see the tour bus. I'm like, oh man. So I pull in, I went back to my house, grabbed a couple of guitars I was working on, pulled in and ran into Mark Lanigan from Screaming Trees.
Yeah, of course.
So he's like, oh, cool, come on the bus. So we sat down and sat in the afternoon. And so,
oh my God, talk about, you've had some real good serendipity there, man. I ran into Mark Lanigan. Like that's happening every day.
I know, seriously, it's just the craziest thing. And it's like you said, you got to have your radar antenna up. You got to be always ready and think on your feet. So so I'm hanging out with Mark on the bus, and he was super cool. And like I said, before cell phones, he's like, hey man, do you mind driving me up to a payphone? I need to make a couple calls. I'm like, yeah, sure. So I drove him up to a payphone. He calls, makes his calls, gets back in. We go back. We're checking out the guitars, and he said, wow, this is so cool. He goes, you coming to the show? I said, no, I don't have tickets. He goes, oh, I'll put you on the guest list. So of course, my band at the time, I'm like, hey, does anybody want to go? And they're like, oh, I can't. They're all kicking themselves. And so I went by myself, which was probably better in retrospect. And this was a really good learning lesson again, because you travel lighter alone. And if you have two dudes trying to get into a show, it's a whole lot harder than having just one guy that's there. And they're like, yeah, come on in. Here's a pass. Instead of here's 2 or 3 passes for you and your knucklehead friends.
Oh, yeah.
So I went and, I go back home. I come back and it's just a mob scene. So I see Mark and he goes, here, I can't remember. I got there. I got in and I met Lane.
Lane Staley, yeah.
And so Lane and I are hanging out, and he goes, come on and watch the show. So we go in, and Screaming Trees comes on, and I'm standing there with him, and he's just the coolest dude. We're laughing, and I had, I'm like, God, man, he sounds like Jim Morrison. And Lane leans over and he goes, Jim Morrison with balls, So it's like, oh my God. And they're watching the show with him. And then, Lane had his substance abuse issues and everything. So I had a cold at the time, and I'm rubbing my nose. And so Lane goes, he's like, what you rubbing your nose for? And, I got a cold,
he
man.
thought you were just sniffing some blow.
How about turning me on to some of that cold? Like, no, dude, it really is a cold. So, just so ridiculous.
You know, when I heard Mark Lonigan in an interview, I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago, and he had a pretty bad substance abuse problem. I wasn't aware of that, and I've always thought he's had a wonderful voice and just a very distinct, gravelly, melodic sound. But he was pretty messed up too. I didn't realize that.
One of the greatest singers of our generation, you know, and unfortunately with the loss of, you know, these guys, it's like Chris Cornell and then Chester from Linkin Park recently. And it's just so sad that these guys have their demons, you know, and Scott Weiland and these guys. It's heartbreaking, you know, because you think about it. And I've got a lot of friends who are touring musicians, and you know, if you can go out there and be strong enough and mature enough to handle being on the road, you know, the excitement is the 2 hours a day that you're on stage. And then you have 22 hours to fill, and there's nothing to do. Yeah. You know, you think it would be this glamorous life, and it's just boring as hell. So, of course, what are you going to do? You're going to start boozing. You're going to start, you know, doing drugs as a mid-20s kid who thinks it's all, you know, party until your body just absolutely wears out. So it's just a sad thing, man. It's like, you know, it's not all as glamorous as everybody, you know, seems to think it is.
No, and in fact, I interview a lot of musicians, and I always say, what's the favorite? Not always, but I often ask, what's the favorite and least favorite part of what you do? And literally, with 100% certainty, the least favorite is traveling, and they hate it. And in fact, I interviewed one guy, and something happened, and he got cut out for a while. I said, what's going on? He goes, oh, I'm here. I'm up in Syracuse. I said, man, you didn't have to do this when you were on tour. He goes, I didn't have to do this. He goes, let me tell you, I am so grateful I got to do this because it's an hour of my life. I didn't have to sit there staring into nothing and playing video games.
Right.
So he was like...
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I even thought about this, you know, like I'm like, what would I do if I ever... Because I played for forever and, you know, tried to get stuff going, and nothing ever materialized. You know, they're again the great universe intervening in my what I thought I needed.
Right.
And I was like, what would I do? I was like, I would have this extra little trailer with a guitar shop in it, and I'd build guitars all day while I'm on the road. You know, it's just so that was one of my daydreams, was to be able to do something like that. Yeah. You know, but yeah, it's just what do you do? You know, there's only so many books, only so many video games, and only so many movies you can watch before you're like, this is not cool.
Yeah. And I think addiction is just is a separate monster, and the conditions for supporting addictive behavior are so prevalent in the music industry because of things like having more, you know, what do they say? Idle hands is the devil's workshop. Or
idle hands is the devil's. Yeah, exactly.
So if you got 20 hours a day, 22 hours a day with idle hands, and everybody around you is getting high, I mean, it's like it's a prime addiction, you know, business. So I think it's part of the unfortunate.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so get back to what. So you're hooking up with some of these musicians and selling guitars, but you still need to sell more guitars to make this thing take off. How did you gain the momentum, or did you get referrals from these guys, or how did you get McSwain Guitars to get the momentum?
I did, but I think for me though, and I'm still chasing this all the time. It's like, you know, I'm a networking machine, and it's again one of those natural things, and it's almost a joke because all my friends my entire life have always busted my balls about it, because they're always like, dude, you got a card at the ready. It's like Spider-Man shooting web. It's like, you know, all this, there's a business card present, you know. It's like, so I always have my phone, and I'm always, if somebody will lend me an ear, I will talk about guitars. It's like, right. I absolutely love it so much. And you know, fortunately, I couple that with being intuitive enough to know if somebody's not into it, to shut the hell up and move on down the road. So, you know, I network constantly. So then, you know, it starts to snowball, and you're like, well, Steve Vai and Alice in Chains and Vernon Reid and all these guys start to pile up, and they're like, well, whoa, okay. Then they start to say, okay, well, this must be legitimate. And, you know, I always say I put the cart before the horse with my guitar business, because, you know, I had all these known guys buying and playing my guitars, and it was crazy because most people will have their guitar business and then they'll go out and they have their models and they try to sell them to the rock stars. And it's like I had the guys buying them before I was even designing them and just kind of building what they wanted. So I kind of had it reverse, and now it's kind of come full circle, which is cool.
Well, I think part of that contributor, the reason why that happened was because of what you said, that you're not the guy to sit and necessarily obsess and worry about shit. And I think I've met a lot of entrepreneurs over my life that, hang on, I have a quote right here, and I really liked it. I wrote it down. I heard Joe Walsh in an interview, I don't know, 6 to 8 months ago, and he said something, and I thought it was so freaking cool. He said, how did you guys start with the Eagles? And he said, we didn't know what we were doing. We just knew it was going to work.
That's exactly, that's no truer words,
And that's what it sounds so like true. With you, man. And that's so cool.
That was it. It's just, I don't know. And I still, even to this day, as I'm getting older, and it makes my wife insane because she's a planner and she has to know everything's in order. And I'm like, it's going to work out,
I know. You have to have.
She's like,
sorry, man.
Go ahead, sorry.
I think you have to be an entrepreneur in general. If you're going to focus, it's very hard in today's day and age. You have to be able to adapt to change and just like roll with the punches. Owning a business in any industry, in any field,
of course.
I think. I don't think.
Well, and that's, like you say, it's like, you have to be adaptive. And if I was still doing exactly, like I'm only going to carve guitars and I'm going to carve dragons and skulls. And it's like, well, you're pigeonholing yourself, and you're only going to have a certain fraction of the population that's going to be into that kind of thing. So you really have to be adaptive and roll with the changes. I mean, as the current state of what the doom and gloom of the guitar industry, that Wall Street Journal I think just put out an article like, the guitar is a dying thing, no kids are doing it. But I don't necessarily see that. I think that it's changing in a way that you have to be able to change with it and adapt to that. It's like, I absolutely love building guitars, but if nobody were to buy another guitar, there's a million other things that I would move on to doing. I always joke and say when I retire from guitars, I want to do cars and do really crazy modified custom cars. Like I love Porsches. And I went to SEMA Auto Show, which is one of the biggest trade shows in the world for the automotive industry. A couple years ago, I did a custom Krager hot rod wheel guitar for Krager's 50th anniversary. And one of my buddies a guy named Johnny Mill is one of the up and coming guys within the SEMA industry. And he and I had this dream of building a couple of cars together and doing some really crazy things. And so there's a million other directions that I would want to go if the guitar business just dried up. It's this creative, fire inside that really drives me.
Well, oddly enough, I didn't know this, but I was talking to a guy last week who he builds amps, and he has two businesses. He builds amps and he private label, and then he repairs them. And his office, he shares an office or a warehouse with a stock car company. And he said that he's always been into cars, but he didn't know until he got into building amplifiers and working with amps that there's so many guitarists, that's a big thing for loads of guitarists apparently as well.
Oh yeah.
Race cars. I didn't know anything about that because I know how to put gas in. That's about the beginning and end of my car knowledge. But yeah, so apparently there's a lot of commonality. Hey,
yeah, it's just, there's the cars and guitars. They go hand in hand,
Yeah, apparently, man. So, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but go to McSwain Guitars and you'll see Stephen's designs. They're really, really beautiful. They're unlike any guitars you've ever seen. And the workmanship and the craftsmanship that goes into these is just really apparent. This isn't something like, you could fog a mirror and build one of these. This is meticulous. This is really beautiful, detailed artwork.
Thank you, man.
So where are you originally from, and where'd you grow up? I know you spent a lot of time. You spent time all over, including Florida. But where you from? Where originally?
I grew up in Gastonia, North Carolina, which is right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, just south of Charlotte, southwest of Charlotte. And I spent most of my time there. All through high school, graduated, went to Furman University, and then when I got my medical supply sales job, they gave me my hometown as my territory. So I moved back there, and then and that's when I started the whole guitar thing and started building stuff in my spare time. But yeah, Southeast, and that was where I spent all my childhood.
Did you come from a big family, brothers and sisters?
Yeah, not a big family. I've got an older brother who's 2 years older, and a younger sister who's 3 years younger. Mom. My dad was one of 12 kids, and so we had a huge family reunions. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. We had, and unfortunately, most of them have passed on, but I still have tons of cousins, and all in the Southeast and Georgia and North Carolina. So it's actually it's a lot of fun when we all get together. And we had a really big family bond. My family in particular. We just, our entertainment is just getting together. That's what we absolutely love. It's like, you get together and we would always sit down for dinners and just, celebrate birthdays, and it revolved around food and just camaraderie and this communion of sharing in each other's lives. It's super cool. It's just great. Unfortunately, being on the West Coast, we don't have that as much anymore because we don't have any family out here, but when we do get together, it's quite a ruckus.
That's great, man. That's a nice experience you got to have with your family. That's really good.
I feel very fortunate, yeah.
Now, you said your dad was in steel. Did your mom work too, or was she a stay-at-home mom?
No, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was there for us, and then when we got a little older, she got a job and was working in like an office job for a few years and stuff. And so it was pretty cool having a stay-at-home mom, and that was one of the things that my boys have been able to experience, which I look back on this and I'm still shocked and amazed. My wife was able to swing it between, with my guitar business to be able for her to stay home and with the kids when they were really little. And now that they're older, she started working again, and, she wanted to do something else now that she had some extra free time. But having a stay-at-home mom is just such an incredible thing. I just remember it's like there was this comfort and this safety in having, your mom there to have lunch and breakfast ready for you and do all these cool things. And just, it was just amazing. I was really fortunate in that respect.
That's great, man. I'm glad you're able to do that. It is nice to have a stay-at-home mom. What are some of the, like, we all make mistakes when we're in our businesses. Some are worse mistakes than others. What would you say were some of the one or two mistakes you've made over the last 16 years of building guitars, and what did you learn from that?
Hey, man, I haven't made any mistakes. How dare you?
I need to interview you more. Find out your secret.
Can we tack another hour onto this podcast? Because I have a litany of them.
Yeah, man, we all do. Trust me.
Honestly, I think if I had to pinpoint, I don't really consider anything mistakes. It's ways of looking at it and learning and moving forward. And it's like, I don't think you can learn unless you do make those mistakes. I think that I listened to a couple of people, of trying to do business a certain way and possibly looking to take on partners. And I think that was a mistake at one point. I also think, not really treating it more as a quote unquote business early on was kind of, I think that set me back a little bit. I think I could have been a little further down the tracks had I treated it more as a business. And, unfortunately and fortunately, from an artistic standpoint, I just don't necessarily think like that, which is kind of crazy to say that, but I have such an artist brain. It's like, I don't really, my brain doesn't really function that other way. And somehow I'm able to kind of wear the hats, and it's, now I do have a business partner, one of my best friends from college, who is just an incredibly shrewd businessman, and he's my brother. His name's Steve Hall, and we went to Furman together, and he lives in Seattle, and so me being in Portland, we're able to get together quite often.
Awesome.
And he's such an incredible inspiration to me, because he's helping me, and it just takes that load off. But he's such a shrewd and smart guy that he's able to steer the ship in the direction that it needs to go, and frees me up to be 100% creative. And so I think, having that, if that would have been a possibility years before, it might have been a little, it would have been a different scenario. It might have been a little farther along, but I don't look at it as really necessarily a mistake. I think it's just sort of the creative way of the guitar has grown. The guitar business has grown. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think I always look at everything as a test. If you don't know what to do, you don't, unless you have somebody guiding you there, and now you got a guy who's a partner who can handle more of the business stuff. But everything else otherwise is a test.
Right.
You don't know what the results are going to be. You got to look at it as a test. Exactly. It worked or it didn't work, or it worked a little bit or it didn't work a little bit.
Right, and it's sort of one of those. It's sort of like a Roomba, those little vacuums that bounce around. It's like totally. They hit something and they go the other way, and that's the way I've always been in life. Is like, you just try something, and if it doesn't work, then you go the other way and you just keep moving. You can't stop and say, "Oh, woe is me, I really screwed up there." Even with the nose and all that, it doesn't stop me. I just keep going and find a different path.
That's great, man. The flip side of that question is, are there one or two particular things that you did which at the time might have been out of your comfort zone, but hindsight 2020, they turned into like really good moves that you made?
Absolutely. When I moved to LA, that was absolutely, there was no question that was one of the best decisions I ever made. I had broken up with the girlfriend, quit my job, had an opportunity. I had no strings whatsoever outside of just my family, my extended family, my parents and my brother and sister and friends back in Charlotte. But I had an opportunity. I said, if I don't take this now, I will never forgive myself, and I will never have this opportunity. I may not ever have this opportunity again. And if I don't take it, and then I will regret it for the rest of my life. So having that clarity of thought and knowing that was the moment to take the chance and move to California and move to Los Angeles was such an incredibly smart move on my own personal behalf to do, because that was life changing, and that was a very definitive moment in my life. Some of the individual moments, like meeting Slash and taking on this ridiculously huge and elaborate wall mount piece that I did for his now ex-wife, Perla, the Wicked Witch of the West. I had no. He goes, "Hey, can you do this? Can you build this Wicked Witch of the West guitar in this huge castle wall mount?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I think we kind of developed the idea together. He's like, "Well, what could you do with this?" And I was like, "Well, I could do this and this." And I'm like, "I have no idea if I can do this." And I was just kind of dreaming it up and dancing on the fly and coming up with this whole concept of this guitar. And it just turned out amazing. It turned out so cool. And he loved it and she loved it. And it's definitely been one of my best pieces that I've ever attempted to this day.
And moving out to LA was good because you basically got to network in all the right places and it helped your business take off, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
If it's like you said, you're sort of, if I would have stayed in Charlotte, it would have been kind of for me with my guitar business equal to sitting on the couch and waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
And so it was where, the guy, one of my buddies was Johnny from Coffin Case that I moved in with, and he was really dialed in with NRG Recording Studio in North Hollywood that Jay Baumgartner has, and I would go there. I mean, we were literally a mile and a half from the studio, so we would go hang out at the studio, and you had Velvet Revolver hanging out there. You had Linkin Park. You had Sugar Ray. Everybody and their brother recorded there, and so I would go, would hang out, and would meet these guys. And Korn, when I first moved out there, I had met Korn when they were touring. I think it was the Follow the Leader album, and ended up they were recording. Or no, I'm sorry, they were touring Life is Peachy on a festival, and then they were recording the Follow the Leader album at NRG. So I went over there, sold them 2 guitars, and so they, that was a really, really cool thing to be able to do. So,
and I'm assuming wherever you went, you had a guitar or 2 with you deliberately to make sure you got. If somebody,
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would either have a guitar, or I would have pictures. I carried around this little binder of pictures with me, with 3x5 or whatever the size, 4x6 pictures, guitars, and then I would have a portfolio always with me, with the big pictures, and people would look at them, and this yet again before smartphones. You have this little library, and people would want you to come down. They're like, yeah, come on down, we'll check it out. So they would come down and take some guitars and show them, and that I would always be weaseling my way in somewhere.
No, man, you're a hustler. No one's coming to you, so you got to bring the message out there, man. That's just the reality when you're in sales. So I guess the short-term pain that you knew you would experience in leaving your family and relocating was far less than the long-term pain of sitting in there and not leaving your family, and like you said, knowing that you're basically sitting on the couch instead of doing something to grow your guitar biz.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. It's like, and I knew that, and I've always known that, and I learned pretty early on to trust my gut, and know in your gut when something is the right move or the wrong move. It's like, when to jump off the train or to jump on the train. Is it moving fast enough? Is it not moving fast enough? You have to make those decisions pretty much with incredible immediacy, So I've been fortunate enough to recognize those moments in my life, and there are times when I didn't, and I said, "Oh, I just screwed up. I should have jumped on that,"
Sure.
And it's funny, like even as small as I remember when Motley Crue came through town, and all of a sudden I go over to the hotel where they are. I knew the guy who was Vince Neil's assistant at the time. And so, I had gotten passes to the show, but I didn't get backstage to meet him. So I go over to the hotel the next day, and Tommy Lee's walking out of the front of the hotel to get on the bus. We look at each other straight in the eyes, and then he gets on the bus. Now, normally what I would do is say, like, "Hey, Tommy." And then, you have their ear for a minute, and if they're like, "Hey, I don't have time," then you just move on. But I didn't. I kind of stalled, and I missed that opportunity.
Oh.
Now, it came back around that now Tommy is actually a very good friend. And he and I have been friends for, over 10 years now. And I met him through some other channels in Los Angeles. And we're buds now. So it kind of came back around full circle. But I missed that opportunity to where, maybe he would have gotten a guitar because he was starting to do his solo stuff and all that. But it's just really funny to think that that's one of those moments where you're like, "Oh, I just screwed up. I should have said hi."
Yeah, but you don't seem too bashful. I think those moments are probably few and far between. You seem like you've been super proactive in promoting in taking. I'm sure the list of opportunities you've taken is dramatically bigger than the list of opportunities you missed.
Yeah, they're definitely. I think I can count on one hand where I didn't assert myself.
That's great. Man.
Good or bad. So
no, that's great. So let me ask you a question. I'm on McSwain Guitars, and you basically, it looks like you have 5 different guitar models, or series as you call them. You got the Flag,
right,
Fuel, Rebel, Industrial, and Vintage series. Can you sort of maybe give me a Cliff Notes summary of each of these and what makes them different?
Yeah, I think the Flag series, well, first off, a lot of them, most of those have a thin sheet of metal on the top of them. It's aircraft aluminum, and I love the combination. That was one of the things that I discovered kind of going down the road, that the combination of the metal with the wood is just a super cool tonal quality.
I was going to ask you about that. So it improves. What is it? How does it? Is it improve resonance, or what does it do?
Yes. All the way around. It improves resonance. It gives a little bit more sustain, adds a little bit more depth to the tone of the guitar because it adds like a little top end to it, like a little brightness to the top end of the tone. And so it's just a cool thing because it's a function and form kind of thing. It looks super cool because you could do a million different things with metal. You can paint it and then sand through it and make it all beat up and look like an old fighter plane or just a battle-worn flag. And so there's a lot of variations you can do with it. You can combine different kinds of metal. You can rust it. You can age it. You can make it turn black. And, so there's a lot of cool things that you can do with it from a look standpoint, not just from a function, So I love it. But the flag thing, I'd never seen an American flag that I thought was a guitar that I thought was cool. I think Gibson had done one for Pepper Keenan of not social distortion, corrosion of conformity. And he was playing this like Gibson 335 with this just beat up American flag. And I was like, now that's cool. Everything else is like this just hideous, representation of a flag. And I'm like, I want to do this really killer thing that looks like an old World War II plane and where it's three-dimensional. So, you do the strips of metal, you paint them, and then I have a seam that I put on there that's metal that I can kind of spot weld together, which gives it a really cool depth. And then the stars, I actually carve out of jeweler's wax and have molds made of those, and then have those cast out of either sterling silver or brass, white bronze, copper, titanium, cast iron. I mean, there's, the limits. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then I'll put the real bullet shells in the middle of them. So, those I love that American flag because it's such a cool piece that's so ubiquitous. I think being fortunate enough to be an American and have that American freedom to do whatever you want. I mean, it says a lot about who you are and where you're from, and I feel proud about that. So.
And you have stars, and you have stars on a lot of the frets as well, which is kind of cool.
Exactly. Yeah, those are all aluminum. They're aluminum inlay stars or brass or whatever the metal calls, the guitar calls for. But there's I'll do the Brit flag, the Texas flag. I mean, and the thing is, it's all common use. So there's a million different flags that you could use. I mean,
oh, that's right. None of this is licensed. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like it's common use. So, you use all these things, and there's a million different ones all over the world and to the States and, different states and different kinds of things. So, the Fuel series, I love old oil cans, and old gas cans. Back in I guess from like the 20s to the 40s, 50s, there were a bunch of different little oil companies that would make motor oil, and they would, it would have all these cans have these incredibly cool graphics on them, and they just don't really do that anymore. Either one company kind of has the whole thing and has their one logo on it, but you would have all these little different individual family-owned companies that would have these super cool labels. And so I started finding these things, and it's almost like American Pickers, where you'll get, or like a market, and you'll find these things, and guys who collect these, and so. I found the one that was a Stay Cool motor oil, and it's just, I'm like, oh, come on. Are you kidding me? This is the perfect guitar front. And so I was talking with my buddy Dalton Grant in LA. He's like, oh, man, you should make the little keeps the motor cool disc light up. I said, that's a good idea. I'm such a sucker for lights.
Oh, that is...
My little case. So I cut the little light box, and it's attached to a push-pull pot for the tone knob, which is connected to a 9-volt battery, and it lights up. So
very
I just
cool.
love that. Like again, going back to the cars and guitars, it's like hot rods and rock and roll, and I just think it has a really cool sort of organic vibe to it. So there's a million different directions you can go with that.
Now that's not a hollow body, is it? That the gasoline, it's not.
I have two different body shapes, or two different body styles. There's what we call the SM2, which is the larger body, about the size of a 335, but thinner, and not completely hollow, but it has a bunch of tone chambers in there. So it's weight relieved and it resonates. It just doesn't have the sound holes. So those are the smaller one that's considered the SM1 is about the size of a Les Paul, and those are solid body.
Okay.
And I do have a smaller version that's a carved top that is that has tone shavers in it as well. So, just but the bigger ones, I do all of those are fairly hollow on the inside.
Interesting. Is it hard to work? I mean, how do you put? You've laid this. It used to be a can of oil, and now it's laid out completely flat. Is that? I mean, that's a process in and of itself, I would imagine. No.
Oh, absolutely. It's. I mean, you have to flatten these things out. You have to hammer them flat, and it's just I'll have to clean them up because a lot of them have residue, and it's not going to stick to the top of the guitar if you don't. So basically, you kind of just peel it apart, and it's fairly labor intensive to do that. And you hammer it out. I hammer it out flat on concrete surface. Or metal surface or whatever flat surface I can find to get it really nice and flat. And then it gets, I'll cut it apart to where I can kind of tile it together because it doesn't fit the entire shape of the guitar.
Gotcha.
So I'll kind of cut and then seam it together with my my metal seaming that I do. And it just, I'll know when it's right. And that's that. I feel lucky to where I kind of know when to stop and instead of keep going with it. And it's like, okay, that's it. Don't move. That's it. Just glue it down.
Well, yeah, that's I think in any craft, that's you after a while you get to know when enough is enough.
Right.
Exactly. And without feeling like you're pulling the plug short on the quality of the work. You just get to know when enough is enough. So I totally get it. Even with I've written ad copy in 100-something industries, and in the beginning, everything I wrote was 30 pages long, and then it would get cut back, of course. But
can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't.
I'm sorry, my headphones just cut out.
Oh no, everything is. I was just saying. I think in any craft you do, you get to a point where you know when enough is enough without feeling like you're shortchanging the customer on the particular quality.
Right, exactly. Or going too far. One of the things where you can go too far, you're like, oh God, it's just like, somebody threw up all over the canvas.
Yeah, sure. Okay, now the Rebel series.
Yes. The Rebel, or the Revolution?
No, Rebel, Campo Santos, Ace of Spades, Revolution, and Peace
Oh,
Revolution.
gotcha. I'm sorry. I thought, my headphones got put down. Yeah, I just, for those, it's sort of the pirate flag. You think rock and roll as being this anti-establishment kind of, the suits against the black T-shirts. So that's kind of the impetus behind that. It's like I've always loved that. The Union Jack, or I'm sorry, the Jolly Roger of the with the skull and crossbones, and then the Ace of Spades, and it's just this sort of against the establishment vibe, and it's not for everybody. That's why there's a line of that. There's a line of the flags. There's a line of, the vintage traditional style. I mean, so with that, it's like incorporating things into that. And there's one that's says Revolution in this industrial block lettering, and it has bullet shells all the way around the outside. And, not that I'm a gun-toting nut. I don't even own a gun. It's just, I think
Wait a minute. You're from North Carolina and you don't own a gun?
Shocker, I know.
What the
Shocker.
hell is going on?
Trust me, I've shot my share of tin cans with a shotgun as a kid, but no, it's I don't really. It's not one of my things. It's like I'm boys, and I know how I was as a kid, and I don't. The possibility of something going awry with that in my house is very high. So
I totally get it. Man.
So, but I just think that bullets, the bullet shells are, it's one of those things that it's a powerful thing.
It's a badass addition.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And it's a powerful thing. It's like, is it the bullet or is it the gun? Is it the person? I don't know. And I think it evokes emotion regardless. And that's, end result is I want to evoke emotion from what I'm doing. I want something to either be inspired or make them feel something, and for people to pick up the guitar and be like, oh man, what is this? And instead of like, oh cool, well this is a seafoam green, oh, okay, this one has a tortoiseshell pick guard. And there's a place for that, but the people who do that and the other companies that do that, they do it so well that I don't want to be in the same fish tank with them, because they're the big fish and I'll get eaten. So, I want to make it to where it's like something completely unique and edgy and cool and makes you feel something.
Now, the Industrial series is really different. This chroma guitar you have, it reminds me of like, do you know who Peter Max is?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It reminds me of like something you'd see in a Peter Max drawing. It's just really cool.
That was yet again one of those sort of happy, not necessarily accidents, but I had, with the in order to kind of up production and things, I was looking into having. Instead of laying the metal out, which is incredibly labor intensive, I was like, well, there's a place, this is in California, and there's a place that chrome plate stuff. And I said, hey, could you chrome plate a wooden guitar? He's like, I have no idea. He goes, I've never done that. I've chrome plated a lot of things, but I've never chrome plated wood. So I asked him what I needed to do and took it over to him. And I thought, well, this is just going to be like a palette that I'm going to really screw up and paint and make it look all industrial. And it came back, and I was like, oh, my God, that is the most insane thing I've ever seen, because it's solid mahogany underneath. Normally, I would tone chamber it, but I didn't want to spend the time to do it if it got screwed up, because the guy didn't know if he could pull it off or not. Mm-hmm. And so it's a maple fretboard, 3-piece mahogany neck. So the whole thing, the fretboard, everything is chrome plated. And it was one of those pieces where when I saw it, my jaw dropped, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. And so I have only done 2 guitars like that so far, because it is so different that people haven't really explored that one yet. I did the Kreger 50th anniversary guitar.
Yeah, I saw that on your site. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I carved that out of wood and had that rhodium plated, which is a type of chrome plating. But the guy does it, and I've even had other like super experienced chrome plating guys come up to me and, that guy do it? I'm like, I have no idea. And, he's like, but he figured it out and he nailed it. And so, it's a good thing, a good little extra piece to have in my pocket. But that guitar has such a cool tone to it. It has this immediacy of reaction. Once you hit a string, it just has this almost like millisecond percussiveness to it. And so it just has such a snap. And it's humbuckers, so you're getting the warmth from the wood, but the whole thing is covered in chrome and copper plating, so it resonates insanely.
Now all of your guitars, your necks, your fretboards are ebony, except that one then? Because I looked at the specs and a lot of them, it seems like a lot of them are ebony. I love ebony.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm not necessarily just, I'll only do ebony. I'll do anything anybody wants. But for me, as a builder, it just is more of a traditional kind of wood. I actually just really like that the tone of it and the look of it.
And it feels golden.
Yeah, it really does. It's like you can get just this hard glass surface from it, whereas I don't think rosewood is quite as tight grained, so you don't get that really hard glassiness from it. I just prefer it for anything, but like I said, I'll make it from anything. It doesn't matter to me.
And then last but not least, you got the vintage series, which is, as the name says, it looks like a take on the vintage type models, more traditional. You got I wouldn't even call it, what is that? It's not sunburst, but it's really,
it's like a tobacco burst kind of.
Yeah, maybe tobacco. It's really pretty.
I just, and I wanted to have something, and this is one of what my partner summed it up perfectly. Steve said, he goes, the vintage is for the guitar for the guy who already has 3 of the other ones, and it's like, he's already got all the other ones. It's like, but you do want to be able to have something that is like, okay, well, this is a more traditional style, and I mean, it is. It's literally a traditional built guitar. There's no real metal on it or anything, like the other. And it's a departure from the Industrial series or the Rebel series or any of that kind of stuff. So I love doing those because it's a different way of building guitars. You have to be super, careful about the binding and putting that on, and you don't want to, gouge too many places. I mean, I do age them and take them down a little bit so that they do feel vintage, so that the name kind of says what it is.
Oh, they're really beautiful.
Thanks.
Are all of these custom made, or any of these production line models?
Well, and I'm having some of the bodies and the necks and fretboards CNC'd now, just to keep up with demand. But sure, everything is all hand put together and hand built, and then sanded and glued and inlaid all by hand. And there's everything is hand painted and hand distressed and all that. So it's just that. And I think I had an article come out in Guitarist magazine in Europe last September, and the guy Nigel Quine, I believe it's Nigel Quine. No, I'm sorry, Nigel. And I can't remember Nigel's last name. I'm losing my mind. Nigel he had said, that the quote unquote donkey work is done by machines now. So kind of was like. And that thing is I absolutely love doing, building the bodies and the necks by hand. It's just, but that you're talking 6 weeks as opposed to a couple of weeks to build or like to have a body ready to go. And it's my specs. Everything is done according to the drawings that I send the CNC guys. And, it's so much more time management. And it cuts down the build time by weeks and weeks and weeks.
And I think that's the way most people are going now, to be honest with you, with the CNC
machines. I think in order to have a business, and you have to. I mean, there's no other way to do it unless you're charging $50,000 for a guitar, which I absolutely love the art piece guitars too, but I also want to build equity in my brand. I want to get it out there and not just have which is kind of crazy because that's another thing that my partner Steve always kind of reins me in. I'm like, oh man, I could do this and this and this, and he's like, okay, let's focus here. Those are cool showpieces. And another fortunate, you were saying one of the lucky things that I had not knowingly had done was building all these wild, crazy art pieces that people were buying. It's eye candy. So I had all this. I'm front loaded with all this eye candy. Guitars that people are like, how the hell did you do that? And now I can kind of focus on more of a production line and get those out there and still do the once in a while crazy art piece like that.
Which, by the way, in case anybody wants to pay you $50,000 to make one by hand, I would probably say that you'd do it, no?
Well, we'd have to talk about it. You got $50,000 laying around. Give me a call.
Give him a call. Maybe if he's slow, he might take you up on it. On your website, Stephen, it says we build our patented McSwain ToneLayer aluminum fretboard binding into all our models, adding a warmth and sustain to our beautiful ebony necks. Our fretboards also boast custom aluminum inlays to match each design. I just had a couple of questions. One of them was the fretboards, which you answered. What is the ToneLayer fretboard binding, and how does it help playability or sound?
Why, thank you for asking. That was one of the things that I kind of devised because again, with the metal, I love the look and the feel of a metal binding. And so literally I was hand cutting these things out of aluminum plate. I had built all these jigs for my bandsaw, and you're talking a 2 to 3 day process to literally bind a fretboard with aluminum. So I said, what would make this flow a little faster? Again, just to try to manufacture it a little quicker. So I came up with this concept of having it machined, like a little open-ended channel machined out of aluminum, and where you would literally drop the fretboard into that channel. So basically what it is when you're building the neck, you have your neck, you have your truss rod glued in, and then you take this aluminum channel tray, if you will, which we call the ToneLayer, and it glues and screws down to the neck. And then you inlay the wooden fretboard into the middle of that. So once it's done and the nut is glued on, all you see is this beautiful aluminum or brass or copper or whatever the metal is binding that goes around the fretboard. But there's a thin, about a millimeter thick layer, I believe about 2 millimeter thick layer of metal that goes all the way down the fretboard underneath the wood and transfer. And when I had first put this one on, it transfers so much vibration down the neck. It adds so much more sustain and a little more stiffness to the neck. So you're getting these benefits from something that was just done strictly for aesthetics to begin with. And I actually, it's kind of patent on it. One of my best friends that I grew up with lives here in Portland. He's a patent and trademark attorney, and he helped me get this thing going. And he said it was one of the fastest patents he's ever seen go through. It went through in about years. He said normally they usually take about 5 to 8 years to go through. And there's a bunch of derivations of the patent that are accounted for. It's not just the full tray. It's also the binding and also strips that go down underneath, and then the plate underneath without the binding. And so there's a bunch of variances that I can do with it that it still falls under that quote unquote tone layer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun, man. It's like, I'm pretty proud of it and pretty excited with it. And I actually have some guys from Lewis and Clark College that are coming by maybe this week who are they study sound. They study sound and do all their research on this. I went to a presentation that they had done where they were studying the vibration of bracing on mandolins. And so they are going to take a couple of the guitars, one with, one without, and show what the differences are between the two and how much more vibration and how much more it boosts the tone of the guitar and the sound of the guitar. So it's going to be interesting. I'm actually going to have some scientific data to back it up.
Yeah, that's a great USP. Now you got data, especially now you got data to back up. Unique selling, your differential. That's an awesome differential besides the actual differential in the aesthetics, which is great.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of time here.
No.
Just talk briefly about your pickups, the Arcane brand pickups. I'm not familiar with them, but that doesn't mean anything. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I've known Rob Timmons is I've known him for years and years and years. He graduated, I believe, from the Roberto Venn School of Luthieri in
Arizona.
Yes, in Arizona.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I'm talking to a guy from there this afternoon. I got a phone call.
Oh, cool. Well, I think I'm pretty sure Rob. I'm pretty sure that's where he went to school. But he graduated, and he was running Fernandez guitars when I met him when I first moved to LA. And we've been buds ever since and reconnected. He's like, "Hey, listen, I'm starting a pickup company." He goes, "I'd love to do some pickups for you." So we started working together, and his quality and his eye for detail is just immaculate. Granted, pickups are not. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors that go on, but with that, you can get a lot of crap out there too. Yeah. And so I prefer the smaller boutique builders just because Rob actually he winds these specs to what works best with the metal top and the wood with my guitars. So they're kind of fine tuned for my guitars. I prefer his pickups, and I've been using his pickups. That's not to say if somebody came to me and said, well, I want Duncan's or DiMarzio's or whatever, of course, I will honor that and go with that. But there's a million different pickup companies out there. Like TV Jones is actually sending me a couple of pickups to try out, some different things just for different voicings. And so, but Rob has just been an incredible asset to have because of the way he builds pickups. He's very meticulous with it. He builds them one at a time. It's hand built. He's in North Hollywood, and he's just a good guy, And there again, when you're doing business, I want to work with the guys that I like, and the people that I like and that have been, they're helping build their company and build my company together, So Rob's always been super cool to me, and he builds a great product. I can't say enough good things about him.
That's great. The other nice thing about that is when you've got a smaller boutique shop that does good work, it's a layer of accountability. Like if anything goes wrong, hey Rob, can you fix this?
Absolutely.
It's nice to have that where, can you call up some of the other guys? Maybe not, probably not, but it's nice to have this kind of layer of. I know I like doing business with people I can do that with, or
Absolutely.
Where do you see McSwain Guitars going in the next few years, or what do you if you had a wish list to get a magic wand, what do you want to see happen to it over the next few years?
I see McSwain Guitars going to the beach in Hawaii and sitting there for a couple of weeks.
There you go, man. having a Mai Tai. Yeah, I see Craig Garber doing that too.
Oh man, yeah. Honestly, I see building production. I actually have a couple guys that are working with me now, which has just been incredible. There's a guy here in Portland that's working with me named Chad, who is just a really super cool guy, and he's a great guitar player, and he's got great artistic intuition, but he did not know how to build guitars. So I said, look, I can teach you, and I can bring you in. And so he's been coming in a couple days a week and working with me. And it's funny because I never fancied myself a good teacher. I still don't, and I'm learning my limitations on what I can and can't do, and what I can teach. And a lot of it is being able to use your judgment and your intuition of what you want to build. And so he's working with me now. Also, my partner Steve has a younger brother named Les Hall who lives right outside of Atlanta, and I've known Les since he was a kid. He's a couple years younger than me and his brother, and I got to know him when we were in college, and we've stayed friends ever since. And Les is the same thing. Les is just a virtuoso musician. He was a touring musician with a band called Crossfade. He played keyboards with Trey Anastasio. So he's been on the road for a long time, and then he's married with a kid and lives in Atlanta, and he's producing bands. And so he was helping us out at NAMM last year, Winter NAMM. And Steve and I were talking, it's like, we're trying to, streamline production. It's like, what's the biggest time constraint in builds? I said, necks. Necks are by far the biggest time suck, And so if I could find somebody who was meticulous and OCD enough to do this, I would hire them in a second. So I'm looking at Les. I'm like, do you know anybody who's OCD and enough? And it's just, he's right there in front of me. And Les is one of these guys who, when he starts to learn something, he obsesses over it until he gets it absolutely perfect. So he flew out to Portland in February and trained with me for a week. We were here, for a solid week, about 12 to 14, 15 hours a day, just working on necks. And so he videoed it and made notes, went back, got his shop all set up, and he has just been kicking ass getting this thing up to speed. And, he's getting ready to send me the first necks that he's been working on. And just, we have a whole Skype setup where I've got a monitor and a great camera that looks down on my bench, and he has the same setup. So we can just
that's great.
Text each other and dial each other up and get rolling. And it's been amazing because I think that's going to up production a lot. So
what does that drop in?
I think having.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, adding these two guys, what is that going to bring your lead time down from X to Y?
Well, and that's where it leads back to your initial question of where do I see this in a couple of years. It's gonna cut it down. It's hard to quantify that yet, but I know it's going to shave off weeks of time because where I have a stack of 8 guitars going right now that I'm working on solely by myself. That's going to, once these guys are up to speed and really, helping me out, it's going to be like having 2 me's, or 3 me's working on this. And it's weird because I'm such a social person, but I find that when I'm building guitars, I really enjoy my solitude. And it's like you have to change with that. There again goes back to being adaptive and being able to, change how you function and in order to make things better. And I've had to really okay, well, I have a very tight space, so I'm going to have somebody here working with me. This is how we're going to have to do it, so it's been pretty cool. And so I see production climbing, and then just getting the name out there. It's just one of those things where it's a slow build. And, fortunately, Steve, my partner, is a wizard at dialing in social media and technology and utilizing all these things to a very, very efficient degree in getting the name and the brand name out there and trying to reach as many people as we have. We have about 30,000 people on Facebook, our Facebook likes page. And so, right now, which is incredible, Instagram's climbing. It's, up to about 3,700 people. Twitter's kind of lagging behind, but it's all organically, built. Like, I think one of the funny things is now, since I've been buddies with Slash for so long, he checks out all my Instagram stuff and likes the stuff. And so people see that.
Yeah. So people follow him. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
very cool.
How that translates into sales, I don't really know yet, but, trying to get production streamlined, and you don't want to get too far out over your skis and have a whole warehouse of guitars and then try to find homes for those. But there again, you don't want to be quoting, 6-month lead times. And so that's the hard part with it, is like, you want to keep everything sort of balanced. So.
No, it's always, I talk to other custom builders. You have a very tough job what you do, and the fact that you brought extra people in, I'm happy for you, because it's definitely going to make your life easier, a lot easier.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have 2 questions left. I really appreciate all the time you give me. You've been super generous.
Yeah, man.
Number 1, who's had the biggest influence on your life?
Honestly, I would have to say my dad. He was, he kind of, he helped me build a foundation of, what it means to be, somebody who's an entrepreneur. And I mean, he was always, I've seen him do great, and I've seen him struggle, and he's just an amazing, amazing man. And it's 2-part. He's the one who gave me the building blocks and built the foundation of who I am and how I conduct myself and that. The second person is my wife. Robin is just, we've been married for coming up on 14 years now, I think. 14 years. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's nice, man. That's good.
Thanks. Yeah. And she's just, we got married when we were 33 and 34, I believe. Mm-hmm. And, she's amazing. She's challenges me and is, calls it like it is. She's like, that's bullshit, and say you should really think about this in this way. And it's like, she'll call me out on stuff, and it's cool, because it's not in you're wrong way. It's like, hey, look, let's look at it this way. And it's, even if it's not what I want to hear, it's just, it makes me, it's like, and it's funny, because I've seen friends, with the opposite, where it's like, oh, the old lady, the ball and chain. And my wife, she's got a great eye for detail too. A lot of times she doesn't play guitar. But I'll take a design and show her, and she's like, I don't know, what do you think about this? And she's come up with some really cool solutions to things that I would never think of. So she comes at it from a different way of thinking, and she's just my biggest, supporter of the guitar business, and it's just awesome, So
that's great, man.
Yeah,
I think that having a supportive wife if you're an entrepreneur, makes all the difference in the world. I mean, it has for me, for sure. So. Oh,
absolutely. It's like, and I tell you, it's like the poor thing has just been put through the ringer with, all right, where's the mortgage coming from this month? So, yeah. So you're like, but she's awesome, man. She's kept, if it wasn't for her, I'd be still living in some hovel over in North Burbank. So,
And one last question. What's the most important lesson that your business has taught you?
Perseverance. I mean, no question. It's just like, just keep going. I mean, but do it in a smart way. It's like, if something's not working, figure out a better way to do it, or figure out another way to do it. And it's just, you can't expect something to happen overnight. It taught me perseverance and patience. Because like I said, when we first started, it's like, I feel like the luckiest man on the face of the earth, because I get to do what I love to do every day. And I have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. And, like we were saying, is if I was looking to get rich doing this, I'm either an idiot or insane, because you don't get rich doing this kind of stuff. You do it because you love to do it. And you want to create something that's going to be around for hopefully a couple 100 years and inspire people and really do something that would change somebody's life,
And like you said, rich is not always money. It's the quality of life, the time you get with your wife and kids that you wouldn't otherwise get, and you're paying your bills. So, there's a trade-off there. So it's all relative,
Absolutely.
Hey, listen,
Absolutely.
I cannot thank you enough for your time, being really generous with it. Is there anything you'd like to promote or anything else you're working on now that you want to let people know about? I will tell them personally, go to McSwainGuitars.com. It's MCSWAIN guitars.com. Stephen's got an email address you can subscribe, and check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Just gorgeous stuff here. Anything Thanks. Else that,
I keep looking out for McSwain Guitars and spread the word if you would be so kind, and share all the, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and share the posts and get on. We got some swag. We got some T-shirts and little metal picks that I do that I, have carved out of wax and have them cast out all different kinds of metals. And so if you're looking for Christmas gifts coming up, always go to McSwainGuitars.com. But no, I just, and thank you, Craig. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm really flattered that, you'd want to talk to me and hear about the crazy stuff that I do. So, I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Hey, thanks very much for listening. You can sign up to get notified of future episodes on our website at everyonelovesguitar.com. Now go play your guitar and have fun. Till next time, I'm out. Peace. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.